Welcome back to Ethically in Kaushik here. Thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the essentials of hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy is quite literally beyond or excessive nourishment. When you're training for bodybuilding competitions or generally for aesthetic purposes, you're training for hypertrophy. Also note that strength and hypertrophy are not completely unrelated topics like I mentioned before. When you're training for strength, your muscles will grow, that is hypertrophy, but it will not be as much as when you are training for hypertrophy specifically. The converse is also true, wherein there is some improvement in strength when you are training for hypertrophy, but not as much as when you are training for strength specifically. There is also another side to hypertrophy that you can think of to help you understand the major principle of hypertrophy. Think of a gymnast. They are jacked beyond imagination. Some of them are on performance enhancing drugs, but many of them are not, but they still look jacked. The reason why they look jacked is because of the fact that they are applying tension on the muscles, but they're using body weight, unlike in conventional hypertrophy training where we use free weights. So the thing to understand here is tension on the muscle, which is creating that stimulus for hypertrophy. So the currency for hypertrophy is muscle tension, and this is one of the most important things that you should keep in mind while training for hypertrophy, or if you're going to write training programs for hypertrophy for your clients. Hypertrophy is about increasing the size of your muscles and definition of your muscles. You achieve hypertrophy by increasing the inefficiency of an exercise or movement across its range of motion so that it provides enough stimulus for your muscles to grow. Hence, the various training modalities for hypertrophy are aimed at increasing the inefficiency of any type of movement that you're doing so that it provides enough stimulus for growth. Consider a basic barbell bicep curl. So when you're doing a standing bicep curl, the easiest and efficient way of moving the bar from point A to point B is by generating momentum through your legs and bringing the bar up. There is not enough stimulus on the biceps to grow. Hence, the inefficiency can be introduced by moving the bar in a focused manner by contracting your biceps from point A to point B in a slow, controlled manner. But there are still ground reaction forces through the ground, and you can't necessarily negate it when you're standing and doing it. But you can increase the inefficiency by sitting down and doing the bicep curl in that case. An even more inefficient way of doing that is to slowly lower the bar from point B to point A, so that, which is the eccentric portion of the lift, which increases the tension on the muscles even more. So basically, in that case, the muscle is under higher tension for a slightly longer time, which is a different type of stimulus for the muscle to grow. Another stark contrast between hypertrophy and strength training is the intensity. You can remember intensity as equivalent to heart rate. So the higher the heart rate, higher the intensity in most cases. When you're training for hypertrophy, the intensity is lower because you're training with weights that allow you to fail at the 6 to 12 rep max ranges, and the intensity doesn't increase until the fatigue effects come in towards the last 1 or 2 reps of your working set. If you wear a Fitbit or a device that measures your heart rate, you'll notice that the intensity or the heart rate of an exercise for hypertrophy training is relatively lower than the intensity or the heart rate when you're doing an exercise for strength. There is also a difference when we are talking about intensity for weight loss training programs. The intention of weight loss programs is to increase intensity, while the intention of strength training is to increase the force generated by a muscle. Increased intensity or the heart rate while doing strength training programs or strength exercises is an unintended consequence of generating more force, while the intention mainly in terms of weight loss training is to increase the intensity. So that nuance needs to be understood. This is one of the main reasons why weight training is considered to be the best form of losing weight in most cases and to maintain that weight loss. Maintenance of weight loss is because of the recomposition that your body attains while training with weights, unlike in the case of dieting or maybe steady state cardio. There are 7 principles of training as compiled by Dr. Mike Israetel of Renaissance Periodization. They are in decreasing order of importance as follows. First one, specificity. What do we mean by specificity? The type of exercise that you choose needs to be specific and should translate to your overall goal. So an example of this would be when you're training for strength for legs, you do a lot of squats with very little leg presses and maybe very little or no leg extensions at all. But when you're training for hypertrophy, you do a lot of leg presses and a lot of leg extensions while doing little squats. The second training principle is overload. What type of overload are you giving? When and how are you giving those overloads in different parts of your training program? The third training principle is fatigue management. How much recovery period is there for your training so that it keeps your adaptation mechanisms sharp? The fourth one is stimulus-recovery-adaptation, which is like a combination of these three things. So you identify the right type of stimulus, you identify the right types of recovery period for optimal recovery, which sharpens your adaptation machinery, thus allowing you to perform better in the long run. The fifth training principle is variation. What type of variation? So there are different variables in which you can on which you can apply variation, such as the type of exercise you choose, the intensity, the rest periods, the volume, and many other factors are there on which you can apply variation. Phase-potentiation is an interesting and important topic to understand, especially when you are training advanced athletes. A simple example of this would be laying the foundations of basic strength training, which then facilitates or potentiates the next phase of training, which will be for that sport-specific training to improve performance in that sport. This order should be logical so that the first phase potentiates or facilitates the next phase to make better gains and optimal or supra-optimal performance in the long run. The last training principle is individualization. Everyone knows that each person is different from one another and they are different at different stages of their own training life cycle. So training plans should be developed according to that person's needs and the level at which they are for optimal or supra-optimal performance. The first three, specificity, overload, and fatigue management, are the most important ones for beginners and early intermediates. The other four are mainly focused on late, intermediate, and advanced stage athletes. The level you're at, intermediate, beginner, and advanced, depends not on the number of years of training you've had, but on the ease of adaptation and the rate of recovery from a particular stimulus. These two variables further depend on other variables such as the number of years of training you've had, the type of training you've had. So you could have had good versus bad training plans. In addition, they also depend on your age, sex, and hormonal status. And of course, there are other variables also that will contribute to the ease of adaptation and the rate of recovery. We will talk about each of these principles in detail in a different video, but if you're interested, you can learn these principles from two books. One by Dr. Mike Israetel, Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy Training, and the second book is by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, Science and Development of Muscle Hypertrophy. These are excellent resources to understand the basic principles of hypertrophy, and also has principles that you need to understand to be able to train people at different stages of their training life cycle and to even write your own training plans for hypertrophy. There are 6 key takeaways related to hypertrophy training, which are as follows. Hypertrophy is about increasing the size of your muscles and not necessarily increasing the number of muscle fibers and motor unit recruitment in a muscle group. The second takeaway is you focus on increasing the inefficiency of a movement while training for hypertrophy. The third takeaway is muscle tension is the currency for hypertrophy. Number 4. The 3 most important training principles are specificity, overload, and fatigue management. The 5th takeaway is the intensity of an exercise or a session is relatively lower, but the training is still hard. I hope you understand the difference between intensity and hardness. Intensity is the heart rate, while hardness is pushing through fatigue and failure. The 6th takeaway is the training plan should be developed for each individual depending upon the training level they are at and the goal they have. I hope this video helped you in understanding the essentials of hypertrophy training. Let me know if it did in the comment section below. We'll talk about training for weight loss in the next video. Like and share this video, subscribe and hit the notifications button to receive a notification when I post the next video about training for weight loss. I'll see you all next time and keep making those gains.